because as I was growing up, I was reading a lot and hearing a particular phrase that stuck with me for so many years, and I had to fight and defend it over and over and over again. The notion that Palestine was a country with no people for a people with no country. And that really, just I found it to be, how could anybody say that about my existence, that I didn't exist? So to just, because of that particular statement, I felt it's important to just go through it real quickly. Uh, Palestine, or the area that we call Palestine today, or referred to as Palestine or Israel, first human occupants that's recorded was at least 50,000 years ago. 50,000 years ago, there was human activity and human settlements in Palestine. The oldest continuously inhabited city in the world is in Palestine. It's the city of Jericho. That was around 10,000 BC, where they built irrigation systems, towers, cultivated wheat and barley, planted dates, and it was a city. That was 10,000 BC until today it still exists. Then, if we want to go through the Bronze Age, the Copper Age, all of these throughout Palestinian history, 9,500 BC to 4,000 BC, the introduction of agriculture and the establishment of farming communities and villages was prevalent in the Palestinian territories or in that area of the world. It wasn't called Palestine then. It was part of the Levant, and the Levant that encompasses Palestine, Jordan, Lebanon, Syria, and parts of Iraq. So the map changes, the name changed, but the constant, the people don't change. Occupiers come and go, and Palestine has seen its share of occupiers. It was occupied by the Romans, the Byzantines, the Ottomans, the British, and all during that time, the people there stayed there. The people in Palestine stayed in Palestine. From 3000 BC to 1250 BC, the Bronze Age, the Canaanite city-states, under the rule of ancient Egyptian empire, they were Palestinian states. They're settled in Palestinian Canaan along the Syrian-Palestinian coast. So the Canaanites were actually in Palestine. And we can sit here and argue, and I will not even go down that path. But, I can trace my roots to the Canaanites. So I was there first. No, because if we're looking into the future, we can't let the past hold us and keep us from looking into the future. But history is history, and I can't change it. We are descendants as Palestinians, and I refer to myself as Palestinian. Some people say, you're Arab. So, well, I didn't come from Saudi Arabia. If you refer to Arabs as the tribes of Saudi Arabia, I speak the Arabic language, but my lineage and my ancestry don't come from there. And that's a fact for all Palestinians. We're referred to as Arabs because we speak the Arabic language. But if that's how you define Arabs as all those who speak the Arabic language, yes, I'm Arab. I don't speak any other language, that's my native tongue. And English now, does that make my grandchildren English? Or, you ask my 7-year-old granddaughter, or 8-year-old, and she was born in Rato Doctors here in Richmond, no, in Johnston Willis, excuse me. And where are you from? And she'll tell you, Palestine. Her mom and dad were born in the United States. She's living in the United Arab Emirates. But when you ask her, where are you from? From Palestine. So, having said that, again, it's not to deny anybody else or to say that I have more rights than anybody else. But no one is going to deny me my lineage and who I am. And I'm not going to go through all of this. You can find it, and I can give you the website where it goes through all of the Palestinian history in very precise chronological order, and it's called the Palestinian History Tapestry. If you Google that, you look it up, it tells you the chronological order, and it's all available for anybody. There was a Jewish presence in Palestine. Absolutely there was. And I don't believe in the myths that the ingathering of the exiles, because the Palestinian Jews that were there, always there have been a Jewish presence in Palestine. Always. They never left. This is a myth that's been propagated, like if the Jews of Palestine somehow got dispersed into the world, and then they have to be the ingathering of the exiles. Well, the Palestinian Jews never left. That has always, all through the history of Palestine, ever since there was Judaism, there was Jewish presence in Palestine. Jewish community that lived in peace and harmony with the Christian community after Christianity came along, and also after Islam came along. There was always a Jewish presence in Palestine as Palestinians. And they lived in peace and harmony together with their fellow Palestinians. And they all identified as such. And to go to a recent history, my grandmother told me that prior to the colonial settlements that start springing up in the late 1800s, early 1900s, that even in her age, which was in the early 1900s, she was a little girl, their Jewish neighbors who were observant of the Sabbath will come to their house and ask their mom if one of the girls could come and light our kerosene lanterns. And they would do it gladly. They attended each other's holidays, attended each other's celebrations, invited each other to weddings as neighbors. This is very, very important. The Christian presence in Palestine, the Christian community. Jesus was born in Bethlehem. Jesus was born in Bethlehem. He is the original Palestinian. And to deny them complete rights in Palestine, it's crazy.
What did you mean by settlement started up in the late 1800s, early 1900s?
Okay, this is a good question. Europe, and I repeat, Europe had a Jewish problem. They had a Jewish problem. And the Zionists, Christians and Zionist Jews, they found the so-called Zionist movement. The Zionist movement is a political ideology that was founded officially in 1897. No matter how much somebody would stand in front of you and tell you that Zionism and Judaism are one and the same. Well, if I tell that to my Jewish friend, they will turn blue. Because they're not. We know when Judaism came about, and we know what Judaism stands for. Zionism wanted to solve the European Jewish problem, not the Palestinian Jewish problem, because there was no Palestinian Jewish problem. And how did they wanted to solve it? They wanted to create a Jewish state. But for all practical purposes, Palestine was not their first choice, was not the first country they looked at. They looked at Argentina, considered it, considered Uganda, considered Cyprus, and others. And that's not just anybody in the Zionist movement. Theodor Herzl himself considered all these options. Then finally, they settled on Palestine for the religious connection. That we can sell this idea. But if we tell people that we're going to build a Jewish state in Uganda, we have no connection to Uganda. If we tell them it's going to be in Argentina, we're not going to get a lot of support. We have no connection to Argentina. Palestine is the religious connection that will resonate with the Jewish community, and that's why Palestine was chosen. Not for any other reason. Not for any other reason. And the settlements, they started the immigration of Jews to Palestine. They would come and buy land and then set up what's called the kibbutz. The kibbutz is a fenced area. This is unusual for Palestine. There was no fenced areas. Neighbors didn't have fences between their lands. And guards that were armed. And all of a sudden, Palestinians can't travel in these areas, can't get to their land. And the first people to resist the Zionist colonization of Palestine were the Jews in Palestine, because that affected their relationship with their neighbors, their Palestinian neighbors who are not Jews. They have to make a decision. Do I support the Zionist movement and the idea of creating a Jewish state, or do I continue to have good relationship with my neighbors? And this put them in a very, very tough position. What happened, and again, Zionism from its inception, Zionism was never anything other than to depopulate the country, expel all the Palestinians, and this is their writing, and this is their Zionism advanced the establishment of towns, colonies, and independent monetary system to channel Jewish capital into Palestine. Due to the unstable local economy and fluctuating currency values under the Ottoman rule, Zionists created their own financial institution. Despite their small numbers, the Zionists installed a fear of territorial displacement in the local Palestinian population. This fear would be the main driver of antagonism from the Arabs, leading to physical resistance and the eventual use of military force by settlers. Initially, the impact on rural Palestinians was minimal, with only few villages encountering Jewish colonies. However, after World War I and to 1917 and 1948, and the influx of the Jewish Zionist immigration, some people, that's another phrase that I heard beside a land with no people for people with no land, that the Zionists came, and I don't want to use the word Jews came because it's not, it's the Zionists came and made the desert bloom. Made the desert bloom. I'm sure you've heard that phrase because I sure as heck heard it in my school. What desert are they talking about? Palestine is part of the Fertile Crescent. Palestine, under the Ottoman rule, all you have to do is look up the governor of Akka, a guy by the name of Zahir al-Umar al-Zaydani. He was the governor of Akka who revolted against the Ottomans. And he was exporting from Palestine to Europe cotton and olive oil by way of Haifa and to Sidon in Lebanon on to Europe. That was in 1774, from 1730 to 1774. Palestine was exporting vegetables, olive oil, not just self-sufficient. They were exporting it to Europe. The Negev desert is still a desert. They didn't make it bloom. And I'm going to throw some things in as we go. It's still a desert. Palestinians, Bedouins are still living in there, and they're not recognized by the Israeli government as full citizens. There is no infrastructure in the Negev till today. They're still living in tents. No running waters, and these been under Israeli occupation since 1948. So the desert is still a desert, and the fertile portion of Palestine were still there. Palestine had a rich culture. Palestine, one of the best silks in the world is made in Palestine, in the town of Nablus, and not from today. Now it's been almost destroyed, but from, I believe, don't want to be misquoted, but the soap of Nablus, I believe it was from like 500 years ago. They were exporting it to England, and even the Nablus soap was of Queen Elizabeth's favorite soaps because it's made out of pure olive oil, and it was produced in the town of Nablus and in Hebron.
Can you spell Nablus?
Nablus. So Palestine was definitely rich in agriculture. The soap industry, it's from producing 500,000 tons to now reduce. It used to be over 300 factories. It started out as family businesses, but then grew into a major industry in Palestine. But now there's only 3 functioning factories because of the limitation the occupation puts on Palestinians and the restrictions. Palestine, prior to 1917, they had a rich educational and cultural. There were several newspapers and journals being published in Palestine. I'll tell you all this thing that there was life, there was vibrant society in Palestine before occupation. Newspapers and journals like Al-Quds, a newspaper in Palestine, 1908. Al-Carmel, also, Al-Quds was in Jerusalem based. Al-Carmel was in Haifa by the Nasser family, Nassar family, Najib Nassar and Saeed Nassar. Then Palestine, and another journal, it's called Palestine. That was established in 1911 by the Isa families. So Palestine was ahead of other countries in the region in terms of education, in terms of farming, in terms of agriculture, in terms of manufacturing, in terms of organized communities, and in terms of religious tolerance and acceptance of the other. Palestine has the 3 Abrahamic religions living side by side in peace and harmony. There was no distinction. They all looked at each other as Palestinians. We go to backtrack a little bit in history. After, we talked about the destruction of the temple. There was more destruction than just the temple. The Romans, because there was a Jewish revolt against the Romans, they came back and destroyed Jerusalem completely. Completely. Not just the temple, but the entire city, to put down a Jewish rebellion. Who rebuilt it? And who reintroduced the Jewish community into Jerusalem and said, this is crazy? Was the Khalifa Umar ibn al-Khattab in the year 770 AD, when the Islamic forces conquered Jerusalem or surrounded it. The Archbishop in Jerusalem said, I will not surrender unless the Khalifa himself comes. I will surrender the keys of Jerusalem to the Khalifa and to nobody else, to the Khalifa. And Umar ibn al-Khattab said, okay. And he came from Saudi Arabia and he was handed the keys to Jerusalem. The churches were destroyed. It wasn't just the temples. The churches were demolished. When it came time for the afternoon prayer, they were standing at the ruins of the Church of the Holy Sepulchre, the Church of the Resurrection. And the doctor said, go ahead and pray. He said, no, I will not pray here. Because many years down the road, the Muslims will say, Umar ibn al-Khattab prayed here, so we're going to build a mosque. And I will not. So he walked a good distance and prayed where the Dome of the Rock is today. Because he didn't want conflict between the religions. Respecting the others. The Church of the Nativity, where Jesus Christ was born. And churches in the Nazareth and other places. All of these churches were built during the reign of Tahir Umar al-Zaydani. He practiced religious tolerance. There were churches, there were synagogues built in Bisan and Akka and Haifa and the Galilee. He built them. He made sure that synagogues get built. Where Jesus traveled, he made sure churches got built. And next week I will bring you a book. I'll pass it around so you guys can see it. It was published in 1894 by a U.S. publishing company that showed where Jesus Christ, peace be upon him, traveled and which parts of Palestine that he traveled in. People say, history has it, that our village, Bir Nabala, it's named after Virgin Mary. Because when they traveled to get out of persecution to go to Egypt, they passed through that area, and there is a well there in the middle of the village that those people that have their animals that to graze will stop there to water them. And they set up tent there for a few days when Mary and Joseph and baby Jesus were traveling. And they started with the noble one. This is the will of the noble one. And in Arabic, the noble one, when referring to a female, it's called an-Nabila. And with the years, the will of an-Nabila became the will of Nabala, Bir Nabala. From Bir an-Nabila to Bir Nabala. So Palestine, it's rich of history. I read somewhere where agriculture, prehistoric in the Bronze Age, was in Wadi al-Futain. Wadi al-Futain is west of Ramallah. And it talks about how they used the flint sickle. A flint sickle is a sickle that's with an animal bone with the flint stones in it. Then when I saw that, I jumped. I said, that makes sense. Because flint stones are everywhere in Palestine. In our piece of land in Bir Nabala, we would find these little, about this big flint stones that hard as I don't know what, hard as steel, And we would use them to cut things with as kids. I said, that makes sense. They're the first to invent them. So, with all of this rich history, for anybody to come and deny it, it is very difficult at best. I don't tolerate it, I'll be honest with you. My first encounter with somebody that denied my existence was in high school. A gentleman by the name of Sherman Harris came to give a talk about Zionism and the creation of Israel and how great it is and how bad the Arabs were and how they're going to destroy and inflict another Holocaust on the Jews and never again and all of that. And so I started, those days there was no computers. I had to go to the state library and grab books this thick from Jewish scholars. Nathan Shafchi, Alfred Lilienthal, Albert Einstein. And I was opening these books one after another and quoting these guys. And Mr. Harris looked at me and said, these are self-hating Jews. I said, who are you to tell me who's hating what? Albert Einstein was offered the presidentship to become the president of Israel upon its founding, and he said, no way. No way. And today, I refer and I rather read most of the time Jewish scholars and Israelis, where they stand on the idea of an ethno-state, any ethno-state, the idea of a Jewish-only state. Jeff Halper, look him up. Jeff Halper, an Israeli. Norman Finkelstein. Miko Pellet, the general's son. This guy that grew up in a Zionist household. He's a stronger advocate for Palestinians, and he identifies as Palestinian more than I do. These are the people that we should get our sources from. Not from people that have their own agenda that couldn't care less. They couldn't care less. They created the state of Israel supposedly for a safe haven for the Jews. And now when we hear our politicians, the Jews deserve a place where they feel safe. The most unsafe place in the world for Jews since the creation of Israel is the state of Israel. The most unsafe place in the world. And you don't have to take my word. Look it up. To live by the sword does not bring you safety. To deny the existence of the other does not bring you safety. To dispossess, as I quoted you from their papers and from their writing, to dispossess people from their country, their land, to give them choices, all of which are ugly. You can continue to live in this state as a second or third class citizen because by law, this state is only for Jews. You can leave, and we lately have heard a lot of ideas about leaving. You know, could leave Gaza and we'll build it as the French Riviera of the Middle East. Or you get killed. These are the three options that are given the Palestinians. Well, we have a fourth option. No, we're not leaving. We don't want to die. And we don't want to be second or third class citizens. Period. And you know what? You have to deal with it. And those who are willing to accept that, and here I'm putting the ending, but I'll go into details about that. Palestine is for all of us. I will never say that Palestine is for Christians only, Muslims only, or Jews only. No. And I see the time is getting close, because I don't want to. But anyway, this is basically the historical background. Next week, we will talk about the British mandate and the influx of Zionist colonization of Palestine, and take it to 1948. Then from 1948 to 1993, the Oslo Accord, the class after it. And the final class will be from 1993, the Oslo Accords, to the present and the vision for the future. Because there's only one vision that can succeed. There is other plans being put, but everyone that puts out these plans knows that they are temporary. They will solve the problem of one at the expense of the other, therefore not solving the problem of the one that they intended the problem to be solved for. And the lesson learned is that the safe haven for the Jews. Israel is not a safe haven for the Jews. Let's not play around with words or individuals and groups being inherently superior to other groups, and they have more rights than other groups. This is not the case. I could stand here and argue, and I would have a strong argument. Palestine is Arab, and it's been Arab, and anyone that came after us a date in history, or he can't trace his grandfather to be in Palestine prior to this date, well, he has to go back where he came from. That's baloney. That's nonsense. That's nonsense. I would never advocate for anything like that, and I don't think any human being should. But at the same token, someone that can trace his background 10 generations, that's just my name, I can't go back. I go back to Israel or Palestine, and at the whim of the person at the border, I can be allowed entry or denied entry without a reason given. And I have experienced both. I've been denied entry for 5 times consecutively without being given a reason. Except they look at my passport and my name. Where were you born? In Jerusalem. Okay, entry denied. US passport means nothing. And the US government will do absolutely nothing. And the blatant support that this government gives to the Israeli state is mind-boggling. It It is a horrible thing to have some Jews taken hostages. That's not a good thing. It's horrible. But it's also horrible to have Palestinians being held hostage. We hear about a U.S. citizen that was killed in Gaza. It's in our face day in and day night and day out. But we don't hear about a Palestinian citizen, a U.S. citizen, American citizen, who's killed by the Israelis. We don't hear anything about it. Well, this is a U.S. citizen and this is a U.S. citizen. And the Palestinian happened to be a civilian. And a 14-year-old that was killed 2 days ago in the town of Tormasaya for doing nothing except their settlers came into the town to ransack some homes, and he stood in front of them and opposed and said, "No, you're not going to do that." They killed him, a U.S. citizen. We don't hear a thing. But the U.S. citizen that was killed in Gaza was serving in the Israeli military. He was serving in the Israeli military as an Israeli. He's a combatant. I feel sorry for his family, for their loss. But there is an inconsistency here. And it's not going on just in Gaza or today. Shireen Abu Akleh. Shireen Abu Akleh is a Palestinian journalist in Jenin several years ago, 10 years ago, that was targeted by a sniper. Targeted by a sniper. There is nothing going on in her area. And today's technology, satellite imaging, there is no crossfire, nothing where she was standing, targeted by the Israeli sniper and shot dead through the neck and head. A U.S. citizen. What did the U.S. say? Oh, well, the Israelis are going to investigate it. Really? That's how we treat our citizens? Israel is going to investigate it? They're the ones that killed her. And we'll wait for their investigation. I wonder how many Palestinian Americans, U.S. citizens, are being held hostage in Israel. And when I say being held hostage, I refuse to call them prisoners, because they are held without charges, no accusation of anything, and no trial. No court dates. 6 months, renewable indefinitely. And it could go on for 10 years. How many U.S. citizens are being held hostage? What else can you call them? That's being held hostage.